So if you've been a long-time follower of my channel, then you probably know that I have a lot of higher-end fishing tackle. But this summer, I'm going to make a concerted effort to focus on more budget-friendly tackle. And we're going to start off with this reel right here. The cheapest bait caster in Shimano America's lineup, and that's the Caius B. Now, I ordered this reel from Tackle Warehouse, I think on Black Friday of last year, and I just now opened it up today, so it's been sitting in this box for like almost 6 months. So if this reel is defective or broken, I seriously doubt Tackle Warehouse is going to let me exchange it, so let's cross our fingers and hope everything's alright. But it is a Shimano, so I don't think we have anything to worry about. Alright, let's see what the cheapest bait caster in Shimano's lineup is made of. How it feels, at least here in the recording studio. So you do get oil. Now, in case you didn't know, the Caius B retails for $80. Alright, here we go. So a lot of you probably already know this is based off the discontinued CASITAS frame, which is one of my favorite Shimano bait casters of all time. And it's probably one of the most comfortable reels to palm. So everything feels like it's working. Made in Malaysia, no big surprise. Check out that red handle. So for a budget reel overall, I think it looks really good. It's matte black with the shiny nose, but it's got the red spool and the red handle, and it's definitely a step up in looks from the previous Caius, which was like a two-tone orange, I think. I'm going to put a picture up on the screen for you guys. Not a very good looking reel in my opinion, but this new Caius B is definitely a step up. Alright, so let me inspect it real quick, take some notes, and I'll be right back. Now, before we begin, it's pretty obvious that Shimano was trying to emulate this reel, the previous generation Abu Garcia Black Max, when they decided to give this Caius its color scheme. Got your black frame, red spool, red handle, and to me that's pretty funny because Shimano generally like to do their own thing and not try to emulate other reels. And in fact, since the arrival of KASTKING and PISCIFUN and other companies, the amount of sub $100 bait casters has blown up in the last few years. So this Caius B actually has a lot of competition. And true to form when it comes to Shimano, compared to its competition, at least on paper, the specs for the Caius B seem to be lagging. The ball bearing count is really low at 3+1. And I'm pretty sure those bearings are going to be 2 on the spool and probably 1 on the main shaft. The frame and side plates, of course, are made of graphite. No big surprise there. But for $10 more, there are companies offering aluminum framed bait casters. And as you can see on the side plate, there is no dial here to adjust externally the brake system. So this Caius looks to be a pretty much bare bones basic no frills bait caster from Shimano, but actually that's not true, and let me show you why. Now, of course, I showed you before that the drag star does click. It is made of plastic. Spool tension doesn't click, no big surprise there. But this handle and knob assembly is pretty much the same that you get in the CURADO 200K. So it's about 90 millimeters. It's very thick and robust. And you get these power grip ergonomically contoured knobs, the same ones that you get on the more expensive Shimano baitcasters. So you can see they're asymmetrically contoured to fit your thumb and your finger perfectly, making these knobs the most comfortable knobs on the market. Now once again, there is no external brake adjustment on the Caius B, and pretty much most of its competition has an external adjustment, but most of its competition doesn't have this. And that is a centrifugal braking system. Now this is the SVS, not the SVS Infinity, and it's the same brake setup that you get on the best-selling Shimano SLX. Now the previous Caius had a very simple magnetic brake system, as well as most of the Caius's competition is going to have a static mag-track style brake system. Now that kind of brake system is very good and effective, especially for beginners, but it's not a brake system that is generally associated with high performance reels. So the Caius B definitely is different in that respect, and it's actually made very well. It's very solid, no play at all in the thumb bar. Even when it's depressed, feels really solid in hand. You got your CASITAS ergonomics, where you have this little recessed area that your thumb perfectly falls into. You got this front piece that seems to fit into the, I guess, joints of your finger perfectly, at least for me. And it's very quiet. Very minimal clacking noises. So this thing is built very well. And of course that would be something you'd expect from Shimano even in their budget baitcaster offerings. Now what I'm going to do next, of course, is I'm going to bring the scale out and we're going to get a weight on the reel and of course this spool. Ever since this reel came out a couple years ago, I've been wondering what the spool weight is, and that's because of this reel right here. This is the Caius B's counterpart in Japan, the Bass Rise. And the Bass Rise is pretty much the same reel as the Caius. It actually has less bearings, a shorter handle, but it's got that simple magnetic brake system that the previous Caius had, and I'll show that to you right now. But it also sports a ridiculously lightweight spool for such a cheap reel. And that allowed this Bass Rise to dominate a whole bunch of other reels in last year's baitcasting Olympics. I think it came in either 3rd or 4th overall out of like close to 10 reels. So we're going to see what Shimano America has given us as far as spool weight versus what you would get in Japan. Okay, so the scale's out, but before we weigh the Caius B, let's weigh some other reels to give us a perspective on where the Caius B stands weight-wise. Now, the first reel I'm going to weigh is going to be the JDM Shimano Bass Rise. Comes in at 7.14 ounces. Now, next up is a reel that I don't think would be considered competition for the Caius due to it being about $20 cheaper, and that's the new Black Max X from Abu Garcia, of course. And this reel's coming in at 7.43 ounces. Now next up is a reel that costs $10 more than the Caius, but it has an aluminum frame, so this is a reel that could potentially steal Caius sales, and that is the PISCIFUN Alloy M. Also 7.43 ounces, just like the Black Max X, which has a graphite frame. Okay, so Caius B, 6.9 ounces. So Shimano actually hit the weight right on the head, because on the box it says the weight is 6.9 ounces. So that's pretty impressive that it weighs less than the Bass Rise, even though it has a much longer handle and bigger knobs. So that means it's time to get to the weight that I've been waiting to get for a long time now, and that's going to be on the spool. Okay, so I got my special spool scale out, and here is the spool of the Caius B. It is 34 millimeters in diameter by 22 millimeters across, a 150 line capacity in Shimano speak. And typical Shimano, you got your long steel spool shaft. Now I thought that Shimano would take the spool out of the bass rise and just slap on some centrifugal brakes and put it in the Caius B, but unfortunately that's not the case. Now here's the spool on the bass rise. It's got the same dimensions, but you can see the porting is different. The color is slightly different, but check this out. Hopefully the camera will pick it up. But look at the edges of the spool. You can see that the walls of the bass rise spool are thinner than the Caius. And holding them in hand, one after the other, I don't feel that much of a difference. I can tell it is heavier, but not that much heavier. But let's find out. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. So we're going to start off with the Black Max spool first, and it does have a spool bearing, 17.37 grams. So with the spool bearing off, you're probably looking at a high 15-gram spool weight. Right, next up is the PISCIFUN Alloy M spool. It's also got a spool bearing, but much lighter at 14.77 grams. So without the spool bearing, you're probably looking at a low 13-gram spool. Very, very light spool for the Alloy M. Right, here's the spool for the bass rise. 12.6 grams. That is literally on par with the $400 METANIUM. Alright, moment of truth. Caius B spool weight. Whoa, 15.458 grams. So definitely not the same spool that you're going to get with the bass rise, but still pretty lightweight by these standards today. Even though there are cheaper reels with lighter spools, that's still a respectable spool weight for the Caius B. And to prove that point even more, here's the spool of the $130 Shimano SLX XT, and it's actually heavier than the Caius spool. 15.7 grams versus 15.45. So I think the Caius has a spool weight that's pretty similar to the discontinued CASITAS. Now before we pop the spool back in, let me show you guys how these brakes work. Now I'm doing this because more than likely people who are looking at the Caius B are probably going to be beginners or new to bait casting. And these brakes are a little bit different than you'll get on most other reels where you have the magnetic adjustment on the side. Now this is Shimano's SVS, and it is a purely centrifugal system, and what you have are these 6 brake arms, and Shimano apparently has shipped my reel with 3 brakes on, and those are these right here, and 3 brakes off, which are these right here. So in my experience, if you are pretty competent with the baitcaster, you should be able to leave it with 3 brakes on and 3 brakes off, and you'll be okay. Now if you want more braking, all you have to do is activate a brake arm. So to do that, you just take your finger, and that's it. You'll know it's activated because it swings like this. So now you have 4 brake arms on and 2 off. And of course you can activate or deactivate as many as you want. And you can even turn them all off and have complete free spool if you have the skills to do that. But yeah, it's a very simple but effective system that's also found on the best-selling SLX baitcaster. But if you're new to baitcasters and starting off, I would suggest you turn all the brakes on. And you can definitely hear that audible pop when you activate or deactivate a brake arm. Okay guys, so there's the tabletop analysis of the Shimano Caius B. Now unfortunately it did not have the lightweight spool I was hoping for, but in the grand scheme of things, the spool is still acceptably light, and when you combine it with the centrifugal brakes, this reel should cast almost as good as the original CASITAS. And that was a reel that could beat $300 bait casters in casting distance. So the next time you see this reel is going to be out on the water doing its casting impressions, and I'll try to give you guys a demonstration of how the brakes work. And hopefully that'll help anyone out who either has this reel and can't figure it out, or is looking to buy this reel and you're wondering how good a performer it is. Alright guys, thanks a lot.